Hello, my name is Morgan Fiedler, and I'm going to be focusing on Chapter 7 today. We're going to be focusing on the theory of classical conditioning. So first of all, the credit to the man who first discovered this is Ivan Pavlov, a Russian physiologist. Next, we're going to talk about how classical conditioning is essentially learning through association and developing a stimulus and then a learned response to that specific stimulus. The first method was how this was being tested through dogs and their salivation. Originally the test was dogs would only salivate when they were given their food. They collect in this little tube that was off of their mouth, but only when they were actually given the food. But then Pavlov noticed that they would begin to salivate when they noticed the methodical steps leading up to when they got that food. They were so trained in the habits that they would know when their food was going to come to them, and that became a stimulus and they would start to salivate. So he decided to take that a step further and test if he could condition them to salivate at a certain specific point. He decided to test the sound of a bell. So he was testing this whole learning through association thing before he even knew it. The results were the discovery of the stimuli or something that can trigger something else that's either conditioned or unconditioned. The second is that this would allow people to further. This discovery was furthered by John Watson, who ultimately explained this whole theory to envelop all aspects of known human psychology, but he tended to focus on more towards everyone had an individual experience and went through their own different learned things, and that would explain why their behavior was different from person to person. The third discovery was that there are three main stages of classical conditioning. The first stage is before conditioning, where the unconditioned stimulus leads to an unconditioned response, which is unlearned, and another stimulus that it doesn't have any effect is a neutral stimulus that's involved in there too. Next is during conditioning. This neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus that works as a signal, and this has to be done before the unconditioned stimulus, there's a specific way. And then that leads to after conditioning, where the conditioned stimulus becomes officially associated with the unconditioned stimulus. So that means that the unrelated thing becomes conditioned to work with the related thing, and this creates a new conditioned response specific to those things. This first can be seen through the test with the dogs and the food and the salivation, and then later on through an infant boy, how they did a loud noise and scared him whenever he saw a white rat. So then he developed a fear of the rat, and then eventually all white animals. And then furthermore, we were talking about how Watson doesn't allow room for free will, and that this proves there may not be any ethical ways to test this further. So that was my take on classical conditioning theory for Chapter 7.